There aren't many decals that come with this kit. In fact, for the actual plastic kit itself, there aren't any decals. There actually aren't even any decals that come with the Photo Edge Detail Upgrade Kit. All the decals that I'll be installing in this video either come from the wooden deck kit by Pontos, or I have printed myself. The decals that come in the Pontos kit are dry transfer decals, which I hate. I find them quite difficult to apply. They have a tendency to not want to come off of their backing very cleanly, and well, you'll see the challenges that I go through to get them onto the ship later on in this video. As for the self-printed decals, those I've just printed onto standard decal paper with an inkjet printer. There's nothing fancy about these decals, it's just hood and black letters. This is to replace the Photo Edge nameplates that came with the FlyHawk Detail Upgrade Kit. I am replacing those Photo Edge nameplates because they come on a larger rectangular backing, which would be visible on the ship. The letters shouldn't be on a plate, they should be directly on the bulkhead. And even if I did want to use those ones and I were to tolerate that plate that the letters are on, one of them has the name spelled backwards. So we have hood and do, which is obviously quite silly, so I won't be using those parts. That left me with the only real option being to print out decals. Fortunately, that's pretty easy to do. I find wet transfer decals to be a lot easier to work with, at least on ships, than dry transfer decals. Dry transfer decals require a lot of heat and pressure to get them to stick, whereas wet transfer decals only require water. Some might say that the advantage of a dry transfer decal is it doesn't have to have a transparent backing, which means that there is less chance for silvering and it's easier to get it around more complicated shapes. I will counter and say if you apply a wet transfer decal to a glass surface, you won't get silvering, and microset exists, so you can get it to conform to pretty much any shape you like anyway. In either case, before applying the decals, I will spray the ship in a glass coat. The glass coat will protect the underlying color coats and provide a nice hard surface on which to apply the decals. And especially for wet transfer decals, the glass surface will prevent that silvering effect underneath the clear parts of the decal. The clear coat that I'm using is Tamiya X22. While I'm spraying the hull, let's just talk a little bit about the ordering of things. Currently, the process that I'm working on is to finish the hull. That means going all the way through the weathering process on this area of the ship. So I need to think a little about the order in which I perform those tasks. Decals should go first, because weathering should go on top of the decals. Weathering comes in a few forms. There's going to be rust, salt, general dirt and detritus, shadows, and highlighting. And all of those things should affect how a decal looks. Therefore, the decals should go at the very bottom of that. That is why I'm doing decals now, at the very beginning. In subsequent videos, I will show you the various other steps and how they get layered on top of each other to create the complete weathered effect. And at the very end of this process, I'll show you before and after image so you can see how dramatically it affects the look of the model, even when applied quite subtly. After around 3 coats of the clear varnish, I am happy that this model is sufficiently sealed in and the paint is well protected. I'll start by applying the decals that I hate the most. Those are these load level markers. Every numeral on these tiny Roman numerals is an individual sticker, and they are incredibly delicate, and they are very difficult to get off of their backing. For a dry transfer to actually transfer, it requires a lot of heat and pressure. If you don't have one of those in sufficient quantities, it stays attached to its backing. The shape of the hull in this area isn't too bad, but in other areas where there are steps and curves, it becomes more difficult to apply even heat and pressure to get those decals to transfer. This means it will be an iterative process. You're going to have to lift up the backing to see how many of the stickers have actually transferred, and if they haven't, you have to put it back down in the exact same position and try again. To ensure that you're always able to replace the backing in the exact same position, it's important to firmly tape it to the model. Also consider that you use something that does not conduct heat to rub the sticker. If you use something that is metal, it can act as a bit of a heatsink and draw heat away from the decal. Whereas if you use something like wood, which is more insulating, it'll keep the heat in the decal. But with these dry transfers, I found that even that was not sufficient. I just could not generate enough heat on them to get them to transfer onto the ship. So in response to that, I decided to take a more drastic approach. This took the form of a 1200 watt fan heater positioned around 30 centimeters away from the model, blasting hot air directly onto the area where the decal is supposed to transfer. I also used a metal implement to help conduct the heat out of the air from the heater directly down onto the decal to help transfer it as efficiently as possible. And I applied as much pressure as I could for as long as I could until, well, my hand was feeling like it was about to burst into flames. I suppose at this point I should say don't try this at home, and then simply ask that you find a better alternative for doing this and tell me so that I don't have to go through this again. This was a painful experience, literally. But ultimately it was successful. Despite using extreme heat and pressure, it was still quite difficult to get the transfer to work properly for this middle load level marking. This is because of the keel getting in the way, and this backing is quite stiff. It has to be stiff so that you can lift it up and put it down without moving the sticker. But because of that stiffness, it's unable to be easily bent around the keel. So some of the numbers did get a bit messed up in that area. But in general, I'm happy with its appearance. And I'm also not too concerned about a few numbers being a bit damaged. Ultimately, you can call that weathering. In the real world, I wouldn't expect that every single number on every single load marking would be perfect. Especially the ones underwater. Surely those would get hammered quite a lot. So there is some damage to some of the numbers. Call it part of the weathering effects. After applying the decals on the port side of the ship, I spray over them with another clear coat to seal them into the ship. I don't want them to accidentally be rubbed off when I flip over the ship and work on the starboard side. After giving the clear coat around a day to dry, I can then work on the starboard side of the ship. I follow the exact same, both literally and figuratively painful process. After applying the starboard stern decal, I noticed that I have overcooked it a bit. Some residue, possibly glue, has transferred onto the hull next to the lower markings. I'm in two minds about this. I'm actually considering not correcting it, because this is another nice potential defect that can be used for weathering. It almost looks as though there's a little bit of chipping in that area, or perhaps there were load markings painted in the wrong location and then moved slightly, and they weren't properly painted over, or they were painted over and some of that paint has started to chip off. So I kind of like it, actually. I think I'm going to leave it. I'll see how it looks once I've fully weathered the ship. As long as it doesn't stand out too much, I think it'll be a nice little feature to have over there. I do find it a bit hard to find defects like this and not correct them, but sometimes having a little bit of a defect is a good thing. If I do decide to correct this at a later point, it'll be very easy to do. I'll just need to cover the load markings and give it a little spray with some XF24. The rest of the load markings went in much the same way as for the port side of the ship. The only one that gave any real problem was the center one. But I do think I was able to get it on a little bit better this time. I did that by cutting the transfer over the keel. As with the port side of the ship, once all of these decals were applied, I then covered them with Tamiya X22 to seal them in. While I have the clear coat out, I might as well seal in the deck and at least the levels of superstructure that I have in place at the moment. This will also create a smooth surface in the area where I need to apply the hood nameplate decals. These are self-printed decals. I wasn't sure of the spacing between the letters and the size of the font, so I printed out a whole variety of them, and then I just compared all the printed decals to the photo etch nameplate and chose the one that matched most closely. After cutting out the decal, I drop it in a tub of lukewarm water. This loosens it from its backing, and then I transfer it onto the kit. To apply the decal, I place a small drop of water on the model in the location where the decal needs to be applied. Then I slide the decal off its backing onto that drop of water. I then precisely position the decal using tweezers and then use an earbud to suck up the excess water. Due to the location of the sticker, you can see that it is very close to this bar that runs underneath it. A little bit of the clear backing wants to fold over it, so I need to assist it with folding over that line. To do that, I apply a small drop of microset to the top of the decal. This softens the decal backing and enables it to bend much more easily around that ridge. To ensure that it is properly adhered to the model, I then press it down again with the earbud, which also will suck up the excess microset. I then repeat the process on the starboard side of the ship. Once the water and microset has dried off, these decals can then be sealed in. Once again, I seal them in using X22. Since the next phase that I'm going to be moving on to is some weathering, I take the opportunity to give the entire model yet another coat of X22. I'll also be applying some of the effects to the quarterdeck, the forecastle deck, and the shelter deck, so I'm going to seal in absolutely everything at this stage. This is a good place to end this video. In the next video, I'll start with the weathering process by applying rust and salt streaks. If you would like to support this channel or see how this ship looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.